Today we've got a Nintendo Switch that's seen some use, and over here you'll notice that we've got some scratches along the Digitizer in various areas. And if we flip it over, we're actually missing the kickstand, the cover for the game card reader. There's also a crack. I don't know if it'll be visible, but we've got a crack right down here in the front bezel. So on the left hand side here, you can see there's a little piece sticking out right there. So this is going to make it difficult to put the Joy-Con on because it gets caught every time we go to install it. And one more thing here that you'll notice at the top, we've got a broken panel right here. This is also part of the front bezel, and this happens pretty commonly. Missing screws, whole bunch of fun stuff. So we're going to take this and make it look a lot better. First thing we're going to want to replace is the Digitizer. So we've got a new one here, and I'm going to mention up front that what you're going to find about these Digitizers is that they are secured by adhesive around the front edge, and it's so far I haven't been able to find an adhesive that fits these things properly. If you order adhesive online for the Digitizer, what you're probably going to get is this, and this is basically a dust cover. So it will go around the inside of the Digitizer and prevent dust from getting between the touchscreen and the LCD. However, when we replace the bezel, or even if you keep your original, you're going to need something to stick the Digitizer down around the edges here, and that is not what this adhesive is for. This adhesive just goes, like I said, on the inside between the Digitizer and the LCD. So as of today, we've got to make our own adhesive to fit this. If I find something different that is custom made, I will put a link in the video description and probably add a card up here at the top. But as of today, we've got this brand new bezel that we're going to install, and we are going to have to make our own adhesive to fit it. The back panel on this also appears to be missing the part that secures the kickstand. So if I put the kickstand in, there's nothing here to help it, and that is something that we can actually fix. What we're going to have to do is take one of these little pieces here and swap it over to our back panel, because this back panel otherwise looks pretty good. We're missing a screw down here also. So let's go ahead and start by making sure the device is powered off. So you're going to start by removing two screws here and here. This particular switch does not have those screws anymore because of the damage to the front bezel, so I'm not going to be able to demonstrate that. But just keep in mind that these two screws, as well as the one at the top here, are not magnetizable. So they will not stick to your screwdriver. You're going to have to do whatever it takes to make sure that you don't lose those. Don't want to end up with missing screws. And then we're going to have a screw here in the center. If all you're doing is your back panel, you would only be taking out this one single screw. And in fact, I'm going to do that just for now. Okay, so these two center screws where the Joy-Con rails are located need to be removed. And then we're going to have 4 tri-point screws, one in each corner, that need to come out. And in fact, we're missing one of those as well. So I will replace the missing screws when we put this back together. And it looks like we might have something stripped inside, because that just seems to be spinning around and not releasing. So we'll deal with that in a minute as well. You also should have one short Phillips screw right here where the SD card reader is located, and we are missing that one. And in fact, it looks like this may be stripped, so we'll take a look at that also in a moment. But once you've got these two, the top one, the center out here, these 4, and this Phillips screw, you can lift your rear panel out. And it looks like we might be stuck. You might have to maneuver it a bit. Usually the game card reader gets hung up inside here, but we don't have one, so our screw fell out. There's that one. And then, like I said, we normally would have one up here, but that one was missing. So it's very interesting that this piece is just completely gone. I don't know if maybe this is a replacement, but this is an easy fix to do. So if you want to be able to install your kickstand, you're going to need one of these pieces. I'm actually going to take it off of another old back that I have here. And we're also going to replace this game card reader slot cover here at the top. So these are pretty simple to do. You're going to have 2 screws here and here. And then 1 screw up here in the center. And then we can transfer both of these pieces over. And you'll see that there is actually a little panel that goes behind this. So that's going to sit right on top, just like that. Make sure you have that aligned properly. Fill up screw. And then we'll do the same down here with this little piece. Alright, and just like that, we now have a cover for our game card reader slot, and we can also install this kickstand, and these just kind of wedge inside here. It's pretty easy. Just pop that into place. I have to go in one side or the other first, and now we have a functional kickstand. From here we're going to open this thing up, so we'll start with removing this metal panel. You should have a total of 7 silver screws. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. These all need to come out, and they are all interchangeable. If you grab the card reader from this end, you can basically just lift up, and notice that we are missing a little cushion that's supposed to go on the back of this thing, so we'll replace that when we put it back together. And now the metal panel should lift out just like that. Let's go ahead and release our battery. Let's see, we'll do this with a piece of plastic just to make it safe. And let's see if our halberd spudger will fit right underneath here. We don't want to go too far in, but if you just kind of lift on either side, we can disconnect the battery. Now, before you start taking too many things apart on the inside, I would recommend that you test your digitizer. So right over here, we have a little gate that's going to open this direction. So basically from the top. So we're going to come in from this side, and we're going to gently pry this open. I find it easiest to do with my fingernail, but remember, don't use too much force because these things are very easy to damage. And basically, we just want it to flip upwards and towards us, just like that. And after you do that, we can go ahead and pull this little cable out, just like that. And from here, we can plug in our new digitizer. So this is going to slide in all the way to the little tabs that are on the side, just like that. Once you're fully inserted, go ahead and flip that little gate back over towards the top, and that's going to keep it in place. Now, you don't want to put any tension on this cable while we're moving things around, so make sure to try to keep that as straight as possible. And then the fun part, of course, is going to be how do we see what's going on with the other side of the device. Once you've got that securely connected, we're going to go ahead and plug the battery back in, and you should have just enough slack to bring this to a 90-degree angle, just like that. Don't try to fold it all the way over. I'll refocus the camera here just in a second, because what we're going to do is keep this in this position. Go ahead and turn the device on. Alright, from here you should be able to navigate from the outside of the screen. And I'm going to try to get into the, I have to kind of estimate where everything is here. Let's try to get into this part of the menu for all software, and then that's going to allow us to kind of drag this up and down at different parts of the screen. Alright, so let's go ahead and power off. We know we have a good touch screen, and we can proceed. See if I can hit power options here. Alright, shut that off and get back to work. Alright, so go ahead and unplug the battery again. We'll open this up and set our digitizer aside so we can start taking everything apart. We've got 3 screws here that need to come out. If you want to, you can add some 99% rubbing alcohol here and here. As you can see, this has already been removed before. Don't worry about the foam too much, but if you take your time, it is possible to remove without damage. Once you got those screws out, you can lift up from this side and take this out and move it over here. Alright, so now we have all kinds of stuff that we need to disconnect. I'm going to start with these two screws up here where the game card reader is located. One more right down here. And at this point, it's safe to use metal tweezers. We're going to lift up on this connector here, just straight up like that. And there is our game card and headphone jack and digitizer control. Once you've reached this point, we are ready to remove the digitizer, and in order to do so, you're going to have to heat up this area around the perimeter because there's adhesive holding this together. So I'm using a heating mat. If you have a heat gun or even a blow dryer will work. You just want to keep this nice and warm as you're prying underneath. So I'm going to turn this on and set it to 60°C, I believe is the default. And I'll let this sit here and warm up for a minute. And we'll zoom the camera in. And once we have this nice and warm, we'll start prying on the other side. Just remember that the digitizer cable is over here, which in this case isn't a big deal because we're going to be replacing it. But I'm going to start prying on this side of the device, which when I flip it over, will be the left. This is where I'm going to start opening this up. So I'm going to give this a minute to get warm, and then we will be ready to remove the old screen. All right, so you can always continue to heat this as needed while you work on it. I'm going to go ahead and flip this over and see if we can get in. I'll start with the razor blade usually, and then I'll switch over to something a little less dangerous. Okay, once we get under the edge here, I'll get another pry tool, and we can either use something like a playing card, or you may need something a little stronger, like a plastic guitar pick. Works pretty well. I'm going to attempt to keep some of this adhesive intact. Worst case scenario, we'll replace it, but with any luck, if it comes off clean, we might be able to reuse it. The main thing to remember is when you're prying, you don't want to go any further than where that black line is. Otherwise, you can possibly push adhesive onto the LCD, and that is never fun to clean up. All right, so we're starting to get underneath here. I'm going to switch over to a plastic tool. Go underneath here like that. And now we can just kind of work our way around. And like I said, if you just keep heating it up as you go, keep this nice and warm, and it will cooperate a lot better than if you're trying to work on a cold device. You can use a small amount of rubbing alcohol, but I prefer to avoid that whenever we're near the LCD, because if it leaks inside, you are not going to be able to make that look normal again. And I don't really want to lay my battery down on top of the heating mat. So I think I might move this out of the way in a second. Actually turning the heating mat off because we don't want to get too hot underneath here. And also, you want to make sure that you're not prying out the LCD at the same time. The LCD should stay inside the housing while we're pulling up the touchscreen. You see it's actually starting to give quite a bit now. And our broken frame is coming into play down here at the bottom. Alright, and heat is like magic. Okay, once we got this over, to work around the top area, and we can slide the old piece out. I'm going to set this aside and cover it with something so we don't get dust on it for a moment. And I wanted to show you that if you get lucky and all this adhesive comes off in one piece, it's still going to be very sticky. So we can take this adhesive and transfer it over because it's already pre-cut to the right shape. But we're not going to do that quite yet because we are replacing the bezel. Now, if you're replacing your LCD, you will have to disconnect this cable right here and also the backlight cable, which is down here. So both of these would have to be opened up. This one will pull towards us. This one will go towards the top, and that will allow us to remove the LCD from the housing. So let me move my dust cover out of the way. And basically, if we just tilt it like this over to the side, it's going to want to fall out, but remember we've got a couple cables on the inside, so you have to just kind of do a bit of maneuvering in order to get these to come out. And there you go. So this is our old LCD, which we are going to reuse, but if you're replacing it, you would do the same thing, and I'll show you how to route these flex cables once we get the bezel taken care of. Now, if your adhesive came off with the Digitizer, you can actually go ahead and take out these 4 screws. Otherwise, you're going to have to peel off the old adhesive to access them. One of the things that we need to do is remove the Joy-Con rails, and in order to do that, we need to disconnect this cable right over here, and we need to slide it out from underneath the motherboard, which is going to be tricky because there's quite a bit of pressure behind there. So in this situation, I'm going to go ahead and take out a couple of these screws. There's a black one right over here, one more here, and then these 2 silver screws. And if we take those out, that should give us enough flexibility to just gently lift the board enough to slide that cable out from underneath it. We're not going to put a lot of pressure on it, obviously, because that is not a good thing. But if we grab a hold of this cable, let's see if it'll move. There is some adhesive sometimes underneath here, so you may be pulling against that. But if you lift it right here, you can kind of unstick it and then just slide it out like that. And then on this other side, we'll do the same thing. We're going to unplug this cable here, slide this out, and then all we have to do from this point is remove the 4 additional screws from the side rails, and those will come off completely. And as soon as I did that, this one comes right off. So be prepared for these things to disconnect. All right, once you have those off, you should be able to just lift this bezel up. It will get hung up on the inside here, and I'll show you why. We're going to have our volume control and one of the antennas over here that are stuck on the inside. So don't worry too much about those. Unless they don't move, then you'll have to go in there and kind of manually release them. And that's about it. We're going to transfer these buttons over to the new frame. Let's go ahead and do that now. Okay, so this is our old piece, and we've got a little rubber deal that's going to come off here. Just like that. Take out our button set. And then we'll transfer these over to the new piece. And that looks a little funny. Doesn't seem like it wants to go in. There we go. Yeah, have fun maneuvering this thing. Doesn't seem like it wants to go all the way in. I think maybe we're there. This tab looks a little funny. But I think we're okay. Well, as long as the buttons click, we'll be alright. Not sure I will love the way this fits, but I think it's pretty close. Okay. Also got this little antenna piece. Make sure that stays where it is. Make sure you get this little piece right here. And we're going to transfer this over. Okay. That's going to go right here. We've also got a little bit of mesh right down here at the bottom, so we're going to peel this off. Okay, so if we carefully push with something from the front, get it started. That will keep the dust out. Now, getting this back in without removing the motherboard can be tricky, because we need to sit on top of this peg on the inside, and it's going to be difficult to get it in because the charge port protrudes here a bit. So we're going to pull back on this just enough to get the charge port to clear, going in this direction, and we should be good here. Now, at the top, we've got to get this opened up. Make sure you don't lose your antenna, okay, because that's going to sit right down in here. But we also have to lift up a bit to get this to go over the edge. And then we're going to take our volume power control cable and slide it in between the frame and this little rubber gasket. So what I'm going to do is this, because it's going to slide a little bit easier against this card than it will against that rubber piece. Then we'll take this out. We're almost all the way in there, okay? Make sure your buttons are clicking. And that is looking good. Okay, from here we can go ahead and reinstall our Joy-Con rails. So I'll put one screw in here just to hold this in place. Or you can put all four. It doesn't really matter. Let's just do all of them. Just make sure you leave the center one open. Don't put that center screw in just yet. And I'm going to flip this around because I am right-handed. Okay, let's get our cables plugged in so that we do not forget. You can see that this cable goes behind a threaded barrel like this, wraps around, and then comes up on top into this connector. Make sure you have these seated all the way, otherwise one of your Joy-Cons will not work. On this side, we're going to have to slide it up underneath the motherboard. So we're going to get behind the battery cable, hopefully. Actually, let's see if we can come all the way from the end, just like that, and we'll thread it in. Get this connected. Alright, Joy-Con rails are installed. We have a brand new front bezel here. Alright, let's get our 4 screws back in. Okay, before we put the LCD back in here, I'm going to go ahead and transfer over the adhesive if possible. So since this goes this way, we're going to do kind of a mirror image. And try not to touch the sticky part of the adhesive any more than necessary. The more you get contact with it, the less sticky it's going to be. I think I might have torn it, but that's okay. It'll actually make it easier to install. Alright, we are ready to route our LCD into the frame. Fortunately, these are a matte finish and they are not dust magnets, which is nice for a change. So, the fun part of this is that we've got to maneuver both of these cables, the LCD image cable and the backlight cable, into the device. So this one's going to kind of go upward. Like so. Okay, and this one is going to go down underneath the board this way. I can get a hold of it. Okay, that's going to go down inside. Lay this across and make sure we don't have any dust on this thing, number one. I'm actually going to set this aside again for a second. Time for another fun part. We're going to install our dust gasket, if you want to call it that. I'm not sure what this is called technically. I'm going to put this around the perimeter to keep any debris from getting between the digitizer and the LCD. And we're going to peel back the plastic that's on the inside. Make sure not to touch the screen itself if you can avoid it. I've got gloves on to prevent any fingerprints from being installed. Get our sticker on here as quickly as possible. Make sure we have this thing lined up straight. Okay, as long as we can't see it from this side, we're okay. That's what we're looking for. Alright, so we're just about ready to install this. We want to do it in a swift motion here. Like I said, to keep any dust out. If you have some type of compressed air, that's always helpful as well. So we'll try to make sure this is nice and clean, and then we're just going to slide this in right over here. Make sure there's no dust. Or other stuff. Might need to get a cloth. Again, this is matte finish, which is nice, but we don't want any little bits of dust here that are going to be irritating while you're playing the game. So we will peel off the inner seal, and that's going to want to take our adhesive with it. So that's always fun. Make sure this thing stays behind on the screen and doesn't come with the wrapper. Alright. Now the sooner we get this on, the less we have to worry about any dust getting inside. Let's set that down. And we have a nice, clean, brand new digitizer. I'm actually going to leave the plastic on. And we have a little bit of dust, it looks like, on the inside. So, if that's the case, we want to peel it off as soon as possible. And you don't have to necessarily take it all the way off. If this ends up happening, we can usually lift up the digitizer and just blow a little air underneath there to get that stuff out of the way. Of course, it's always hard to tell. You have the new plastic on the front. Alright, once everything looks good there, we can go ahead and start putting this thing back together. If you want to, you can apply some heat around the perimeter there. That'll help everything stick better long term. I won't go into that right now, but what I will do is put this under the microscope for the most part to show how to connect this. You got to be very careful with this particular flex cable. It is easy to cause issues here if you don't get it aligned properly. So make sure you're not forcing it. If it gets stuck, you may be going in sideways, and that is not a good thing. So So what we want to do is make sure this cable is lined up, number one, open up the gate, and then just very carefully try to keep this thing flat if possible. You don't want it to bend on you if you can avoid it. You want to get right in here just in a straight line like that, and I'll use my tweezers to push these edges in. Like I said, you shouldn't feel a lot of resistance. If you do, you might get hung up on one of the pins on the inside, and if you do that, you're going to have some serious problems. Make sure you get this plugged in. If you don't, you will not have any touch. And the way that I recommend you do this is make sure that gate's open, pull this flex cable down, and then you can slide it in just like that. Make sure it goes all the way inside. Flip that down, set this into place, make sure you connect this, and it's going to have a bit of a flex here. You have to pull it back just a tiny bit to get it to align, but fortunately they put this little guide on the front of it so you can see where it's supposed to be roughly. Did take out a couple board screws here. Need to put these back in. I'm going to add some thermal paste here. And we'll put a tiny bit here. Alright, don't forget to plug in your battery. Red is going to go on the left hand side, so make sure you have this in the right position. Get our rear panel installed. And this is the tricky one. When you install this, first of all, there's a small crimp here in the cable. So if you pay attention to that, you'll get a better idea of where this thing lines up. You don't want to force it. It should pop right into place. And once it does, we can put this down, add this screw, and you should have a little black sticker on the back of this thing right over here that keeps that from coming unplugged if you happen to drop your device. Since we don't have one, I'm going to find something that will be close that we can insert in there just as a precaution. Got some foam insulation here that just happens to be the right width, so we'll take a little piece of this. It's actually got double-sided adhesive on it as well, so that works out just right for keeping things plugged in. And all we have left is the back panel. So, oops, I like to do this way. Alright, so this is going to go just like it came out. And now I will round up some of the screws that we were missing, because I do have an extra set around here somewhere. Get these two side screws in first. I had a bit of trouble getting these 4 screws in, so I had to do them off camera. And I think that's because the holes were not drilled properly on this new bezel. But that is now installed, and we just got a couple more to go here. And yep, that screw is completely stripped out, so we're not going to be able to replace that one. But fortunately, we can put these bottom ones in. These are a pain to install because they won't stick to your magnet. You can just set them on top. And if they're going in, be very careful. So aligning these things is a pain. Make sure that's closed. Alright, I think that's as good as we're going to get. There's a slight gap over here. That's because we cannot put a screw into this hole, unfortunately. Maybe I can find something. I'll see if I can find a screw that is a little bigger thread-wise to go in there. But outside of that, we are finished.